Hey everyone, it's the Photo Techie. I hope you're all doing well. So this is the Fusion Pro 4 by PowerA, a wired-only licensed Xbox controller coming in at £70 here in UK, $70 in America, with 4 back buttons and Hall effect sticks. This time around, we don't have a carrying case in the box. All we get is the controller and a braided USB-A to USB-C cable, which is a very decent quality, very lightweight. Never had any issues with PowerA cables before. But in terms of build quality, built very solidly. But this time they are not using the soft touch material on the top. This feels just like a standard series controller, the treatment they've used, but the rubber grips are a lot more rougher. Fusion Pro 3 rubber grips didn't go that far up at the front, and they want this rough. The texture they've used is like engravings of the PowerA's logo. Feels nice in hand, but they attract a lot of dust, and they are basically wrapped all the way around at the back as well. But the back buttons don't have the rubber grip, but they do have the engraving of the PowerA's logo. In-hand feeling of PowerA controls have always been great, and this is following the same design language. If you are used to a standard series controller or even the Xbox One controller, this is not going to be a big departure, slightly wider. Weight-wise, this is 235 grams on my scales, and on the same scales, the standard series controller is 240 grams without battery. So I tested for the audio that's coming out of the 3.5mm port, and this one didn't disappoint. It got to 90 point something decibels on the sound meter, 90.5, the loudest that it got, and I couldn't differentiate between this and the Elite Series 2, which got a little bit higher on the maximum, which was 90.8, I think so. So it comes very much closer to the Elite Series 2. But the sound quality, I still think the Elite Series 2 is like the best on Xbox. But if you have the Dolby Access license, then of course you can EQ. The Elite Series 2 just sounds a little bit more fuller when it comes to the bass response and stuff. But at least we don't have any sound level issues. Now when it comes to latency, so I did a little bit, just some little tests on firing the weapon at 120 frames and counting the frames, how long it took for the camera to capture the audio that's coming out of the headset. The Elite Series 2 was a little bit quicker. The Elite Series 2 was 19.2 frames, so we got 20, 19, 19, 18, 20. And the Fusion Pro 4 was, showed like 21 frames, 20, 20, 20, yeah, so 20.4. Ever so slightly slower in response, the audio response to the Elite Series 2. So the face buttons are membrane and the D-pad is membrane as well. I don't use them much because the games I'm playing are mostly Call of Duty or XDefiant or Battlefield 2042 used to be. I'm not using them that much, especially with this controller we have back buttons, but they don't have much wobble. The actuation force is quite nice. They feel very satisfying to press as well. A good membrane button. And D-pad, again, never had any issues of pressing it and getting wrong inputs. So very substantial sort of feeling D-pad, but again, it's a membrane-only D-pad. So the polling rate of the controller is a standard 250 Hertz, and I tried overclocking it with the USB tools, the overclocking the USB port, and it didn't change that 3.5 millisecond average that it was giving. But it's a responsive controller when it comes to testing on the PC. And the update per second basically changes how many values are changing every second. So it's 2 values on the right stick. And if I just limit the movement, so we get, all the values and stuff, so you'll see 498. So 250 Hertz, it's doing that. Even if I overclock it, it still does that. Now my own latency test on Series X, this came in at average of 8.4 frames. If you guys know what I'm doing here, is basically recording at 240 frames and just seeing how long it took from the stick moving to the screen to register. Same screen, everything same, and yeah, so Fusion for 8.4 average. Wolverine V3 Tournament Edition in the same sort of sitting was 7.72, Elite Series 2 7.47, and then you can see G7HE 6.87, G7SE in 1000 6.47. So 8.4, it's like the Collide in 250 Hertz, little bit slower in my test, but I will talk about that in the stick response curve. So the bumpers, they use the standard tack switches, but the way PowerA places them inside, I think they're at an angle because there is no dead spot. You can actuate them from anywhere. So it's not like that if your finger is landing up a bit further up, it's not going to press, it's going to press anywhere on that bumper. Very nicely done, and this time around they actually have their PowerA etched logos, so they feel very nice and grippy, the bumpers. Triggers, we have Hall sensor triggers, but the issue with this controller is, so we have the full press and then we can basically engage 2 trigger stops. So this is 50%, it will cut out the treble, the first one. The reason it's going to show you full is because of the software things that you have to use, but if I engage it all the way, you'll see it won't do a full press with the shortest setting, because when we engage trigger stops, we don't have auto dead zone adjustment happening on the controller. It's something that you have to do manually, and that has to be done through PowerA's Gamer HQ software, which is available on PC and Xbox as well. So in the software, you'll have to go to the trigger buttons, and you saw that in the middle setting, I was still getting a full register because the triggers are set to, in the software, to 50%. Now, if I go and change that to T1 for basically the stop one, now when I do that 30%, that 70% cut, so that 30% travel that we have, it will do a full register. If you want to, you can customize this as well. So you can change it to be 15% or whatever. So you have to use the controller for this app. It's a bit finicky at times, but yeah, it works. So if you save this one, now that I save it, if I go back to checking this in the app now, because I've changed the triggers, the dead zones manually, the shortest trigger stops will do a full register. So back buttons mapping. We have this button in the middle of the back that we press and hold, and the LED will start blinking. At this point, we basically press the face button and we press the back button we want to map to. In this method, we can actually map the thumbstick press to one of the back buttons as well, but we cannot disable that thumbstick press. So even though my left top button is mapped as my thumbstick press, I cannot disable the thumbstick press, the stick on itself. So if I go there, you will see that I'm pressing the back button and my right stick will be registering there. And if I press the right stick, it's registering there as well. The only way that we can do that, also, there are options of for us to decide if we want menu and view buttons to be mapped to the back buttons as well. That one also we can't do through the mapping on the controller itself. We have to come to the Gamer HQ software in the remapping page. The remapping page will allow you to change function of any button to anything else or disable it. So now my left top button is mapped as right stick. If I want to, I can disable my right stick press here. And this will disable it, but the left button will still stay as my right stick press. So that's something that's quite unique here. And if I wanted to assign one of the back buttons to the menu and view buttons, I can't do them on the controller itself. I have to come to this page and basically change them either the menu or the view button, and that will take hold. But if I want to, on the fly, change to anything else apart from the menu and view, I can do through the other method. So the mapping is a little bit confusing, and whatever you do, so if you are in the mapping page now, and if I just go, I can still go and manually map basically. So if I want to map my AGR1 to Y, if I press Y and I do that, the software will not update. So it's done it, so I am there, but it's not going to update that, that's why. Now if I come out of this page and I go to test and calibrate, come out to the button mapping page, and you will see that it will show up there. And now it's still showing as whatever, I did it here, it's still not showing as Y. So this is what I mean. The software sort of doesn't really work well. So if I press the back top button, it's actually done as Y. So the only way I found it to really show what's going on is to restart if I restart the software, you'll see that that Y will be showing as normal. So now I restarted the software and I come back into the remap page and I can see my AGR is Y. But until the software is running, whatever I do on the controller, whilst that page is up, it just doesn't show what I've done. And some options, like I said, you have to come into the Gamer HQ to assign menu and view buttons to the back button. If you want to disable the right stick press, you have to come to the Gamer HQ. You can't do it on the controller itself. But at least we do have the option to assign menu and view buttons to the back buttons, and the right stick press to the back button, and it can, or right and left stick press to the back buttons, and they can be disabled as well. All right, so the back buttons are using your standard tag switches. The press is quite nice, and the placement this time around, I have to say, like, this is really good feeling. They have some texture on them, and the way they've sunk in a little bit on the grip. I wish they were protruding out a little bit more, but that's a personal thing. I think this is a really good balance. People are going to find, a lot of people are going to find this very pleasing to use. If you've used any back buttons, I think these will be fine. So what I've been able to do on the left-hand side, I was actually able to use my ring finger for the bottom one and the middle finger for the top. Is just because I grip the controller like this, you know, the stick is on the top. On the right-hand side though, I'm aiming, so I need a little bit more leverage at the bottom. So what I do is I grip the controller, I don't move my ring finger, it's just the middle finger for bottom and top. And they have worked great for me. The back button experience on this controller is actually really, really good. I think a lot of people who are stuck using 2 back buttons only, this potentially could be the one that could get them to start using 4 back buttons nicely as well. So I wish they had a little bit more grip or a different kind of texture, like dotted texture or whatever, just to differentiate from the rough rubber grip at the back. But they have worked great for me, guys. I think this is a really, really nice 4 back button design. Personally, I think this is better than the Fusion Pro 3. I wouldn't say still as good as the Elite Series 2, but is definitely a top contender for the 4 back buttons controller. All right, let's talk about thumbstick performance. Now, PowerA used their software outer dead zones, and this time around it's a little bit higher error numbers than Fusion Pro 3, ever so slightly. My Fusion Pro 3 was like 12 point something, this is like going 14. But this is a software outer dead zone. If I've removed the faceplate, and this goes up to like 15%. So I know why they're using a bit higher, because of being Hall effect sticks, maybe, you know, having a sort of a smaller active area will yield better results. So this method that they use, it will actually, instead of clipping the diagonals are sort of like stretched out a little bit. So if I show you guys what they do within the 100%, you will see what I mean. So if we just try to make a circle, you will see that it's actually that bread shape. So we have some clipping you know, happening in the corners, and the diagonals go out. And if we go to the extreme corners, you are going to see a little bit more clearly that, you know, there's some clipping there and stuff. So the opposite of what the K-Silver is usually doing, you know, if you're going with the circular ones, the diagonals are clipped in. But yeah, they're doing something different when it comes to the output. Now, I've made a video recently showing the resolution mapping and stuff of this controller. And I showed earlier the latency numbers. This came out, you know, 8.4 average, slower than the other ones. Now, I tested the Fusion Pro 3. So Fusion Pro 3, using a motorized solution, like those are just elf sticks. That's PowerA's normal sort of like algorithms that they use. There is like inserts of very small values within, like, you know, the higher values that there are. So this is on the left-hand side, a linear push with a motor. Of course, you know, the controller can move, and the way the motor is pushing, we have the other axis moving with the values as well. That's why you see some little deviations, but you can see it's not one block that it's going up by. Many different blocks makes up like one sort of like zone. So 2 or 3, like that's what the Fusion Pro 3 is doing. They've taken the same thing, what the Fusion Pro 3 is doing, and put it onto the Hall effect sticks. So this is a motorized push on the left-hand side with the Fusion Pro 4. And you can see that it's every sort of like zone is made up of like 2. So there's a very small insert of like 0.07%, and then you have a 1%, 0.07%, 1%, 0.07%, 1%. But this time around with the Hall effect sticks, the other axis was not moving as much when we're doing the push. When it comes to zones, yeah, we are getting around like 180 something zones and stuff, depending, like, you know, how it's calibrated. Sometimes you might have 180 on one side, 180 on this side. But yeah, so this sort of algorithm they've used, I think I'm getting difficulties getting used to it, because I'm just so used of playing with controllers. Like, I have the Collide here, so even though this is not linear, but the numbers are the zones are so close to each other, and it's just like one the way they've made it, like that's the resolution there is. It's like 198 zones or whatever. This is a Collide on the left-hand side. And then if you look at the Wolverine V3 Tournament Edition, they are going similar route. My Wolverine V3 has like uneven resolution output, so left-hand side only 86 zones, but it's still the same value, like a PlayStation controller or any other controller. So this thing, the algorithm that they are using, I think I personally am having issues adjusting to it. Now on Fusion Pro 3, it wasn't that bad. I did mention in my review that it felt a bit twitchy at times, that sometimes I was just using a little bit higher of a dead zone, different, I could find settings. Fusion Pro 4, I have noticed that I've struggled to get adjusted to it like a lot. Like it took some time to really get adjusted to the output that it feels. Also, whatever this is, it's making it the output a little bit slower. Maybe this is their way of getting more accuracy out of the sticks that they've used, like, exactly what they're using in the Fusion Pro 3. But I thought going Hall effect, knowing the Hall effect is not exactly, especially these K-Silver ones, are not, the JH16s are not exactly like their, the Alps counterpart. I thought they might have used a different algorithm, but they are using the same thing, what they've used on the Fusion Pro 3, according to my test on the Fusion Pro 4. And I can just tell you my personal experience, not my first choice. And that is one of the reasons I'm not using this controller a lot. But that's not to say the controller is bad. The controller is amazing. Everything works great. But the aiming is something that I personally find very difficult to get adjusted to it. And that's probably just because I am so used to of all these other ones like the Collide and now the Wolverine V3 Tournament Edition, that the Fusion Pro 4 is a bit difficult to get used to. Now, if you are somebody who's finding the GameSir controllers not good feeling, and if you're finding the other Hall effect sticks that seems to be like K-Silver ones and they are doing this linear output, this might be the one for you because it's definitely doing things differently. The expanded diagonals are like Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra, but we have these little, the way the PowerA is doing is a bit different than Turtle Beach. Turtle Beach is like really low resolution. So it could be for you, but I would say, I would highly recommend watching other reviews when it comes to aiming, reading about it and see if it's actually going to be suitable for you for aiming performance. So final thoughts on the Fusion Pro 4, guys. The controller feels absolutely amazing. The price point is so good. 4 back buttons work perfectly, triggers are serviceable, the whole grip with the rubbers and the in-hand feel, the build quality, I think the controller is great, but personally that aim response from these sticks is something that I can't get used to. But I do believe it's like a personal thing. I think somebody who doesn't like the GameSir's output or some of the other controllers that they've tried and they have those equal sort of value output going on, they might actually love this. Somebody who's been using a Fusion Pro 3, even though I think Fusion Pro 3's aim is a lot different than this, but the ergonomics and everything matches perfectly. So this might be the controller for them. So I've never used a Fusion Pro 2, so I can't say that like this will be a good upgrade from that. But from Fusion Pro 3, definitely try and find some info out there from people who have upgraded from a Fusion Pro 3. What are they thinking about it? For me personally, aiming, I think, is something that I didn't like. In my experience, a different aiming experience, if you want on the JH16, is the 8-bit do Ultimate Xbox license one. I have a review on my channel. That's one option if you don't like the GameSir's output. Maybe that's something to try, but this is another contender now. So if you don't like what GameSir and the other sort of like the JH16 controllers they are doing, this potentially could be the one for you, but I would highly recommend watching other reviews, read what people are saying about the aim output. Apart from the aim output, the controller is great. The capability they're giving us at the price point, the audio performance, the back buttons, triggers, everything works really, really well. I just wish that they maybe do an update or something like that, go away with those little inserts or whatever the algorithms they're using. But then at the end of the day, it might be that's their identity, like that's their aim output that they want to keep. So it might not work for some, but it will work for others. But I would highly recommend seeing other reviews and try to find some info on what people are thinking about the aim output. And I would request, if you have this controller and you are using it, what are your thoughts? How has it performed? Which controller you basically switch from to this one? And good and bad, please. If you share in the comments, I would really, really appreciate that. It's going to not only help me, but a lot of other people out in the community as well. I'd just like to say thanks to everybody who subscribed. Your support means a lot. Thanks a lot for watching this video, guys. Hopefully, I'll catch you in one of my other videos. Bye for now.